Welcome. I'm so happy you're here. In the last video, I went through the whole story of how I designed and crocheted my own wedding dress. And when I was looking back at it, I realized that there were a lot of details that I left out on the construction of the dress, and I wanted to go through them today in case it is helpful for anyone in the future. If you want to go watch my previous video just to listen to me rambling, maybe you're working on your own project and you just want something to listen to in the background, please go and watch that. I think that I also address a lot of the reasons why I took the decisions that I made. Today I'm just gonna go through a lot more specifics. The top I constructed using as inspiration Springblossom Shawl by Sascha. It is a really beautiful lace pattern that is very easily customizable. The pattern is really easy to customize because if you look at the vines of the shawl, you'll notice that in the sample picture on Ravelry, there are 4 columns of vines going up. That meant that when I was ready, when I had my calculations on, how my waist circumference, and I divided that by 4, then I was able to easily calculate how many columns I needed for each panel of the top. The funnest part of the entire process was the top, and a lot of that was thanks to such a well-written pattern by Sascha. Very easy to follow, even if maybe you're a newer crocheter or you're experienced but you've never really felt like crochet diagrams were easy to read. I feel like hers is extremely easy to read. If you look at the sample picture, there are 4 columns of vines. So once you start crocheting that first column, you know you're just gonna do the next 3 the same. That's what's easy to memorize. But then the next row is different. You do the first column, and then the 3 after that are the same. Next row up, same. It's just, I thought it was an excellent combination of a pattern that's easy to memorize and a pattern that's not gonna bore you. It keeps you on your toes, and the finished product is beautiful. I just saw a monarch. Oh my god, I love monarchs. All right, let's keep going. So before I take you in to look at the skirt with more detail, I want to address real quickly how I used the garden collar by Ramona Șandru pattern to work for me. So if you look at the sample picture from her project page or from her pattern page, you'll notice that it's really easy to tell from the picture exactly what is going on. You have columns with increasing chains in between them that eventually creates enough space for you to do the edging. And I just thought this was such a smart construction and also so easy to customize. So it's very easy to tell that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows before the edge lace pattern begins, if there are 6 rows before the edging lace begins, then I'm just gonna take the length from the middle of my thigh to my ankles and divide that by 6. So I will repeat, instead of making it 1 row, I'm gonna make it up until that amount. I believe I calculated that was 8 rows for me with my gauge and with my yarn and everything else. Oh, well, and additionally, I didn't want the columns to remain the same width throughout. On top of adding chains to the chain between the columns, I also increased the columns. So let's say each 4 rows or each 8 rows, whatever it was, I would increase by 2, so 1 on each side. That way, the columns, the spacing between the columns is growing bigger, but the columns themselves are growing bigger as well. Another thing that I had to account for, considering I made the columns much wider than in the pattern, I was not able to create that pointed end to the column the way that it is originally. So I had to calculate how many decreases per side I needed to do to make it to anything resembling a point. And they actually ended up coming out rounded, which I'll show you in a second. And I like that better. I mean, the pattern is beautiful, of course, the way that it is, but I'm really happy that the ending of my skirt ended with curved or rounded columns versus pointed. And that was it, really. It took a lot of time. When I say it like that, like, oh, that's it sounds very easy, right? It just sounds so straightforward, but there were countless nights and hours that I spent trying to figure out how I'm gonna do this, and without wasting too much time because we're on a deadline. So it was very complicated to get there, but we got there, and I'm really happy with the end result. So what I want to do now, I'm gonna take you to take a closer look at the skirt, and we can go through some details. Alright, so we are at a different angle, and we're gonna be able to take a much closer look to the top this way. So something that I wanted to address before we got started is when I was watching back the previous video, I got to spend some more time looking at my wedding pictures. And I noticed, and I had noticed this before in my pictures, but I didn't really put 2 and 2 together. I noticed that this chain that I made on the back to prevent the top from scooting off of my shoulders while I was wearing it was really towards the front. And I remember on the wedding day, I was honestly a little uncomfortable a lot of the time because I felt like I was showing off too much cleavage. And I made a mental note to myself, like, oh, if I want to wear this top again, I really want to like make this even higher to be a little more modest. And you know what? I realized I was wearing this thing backwards. I purposely made the back lower than the front. I wore it backwards. It's been 4 months since the wedding. And I just realized this. Just make it more obvious for yourself. Maybe leave like a stitch marker on the inside or something, or you know what, it's your wedding dress, maybe make yourself like a really nice tag that you could put on the back. Um don't do what I did, and yeah, make it more obvious for yourself. I honestly have no idea how I didn't realize this. I look at those wedding pictures so much because they're beautiful. How did I not realize that that's what happened? But anyway, moving on. Yeah, you are able to see. So this is what I called a panel. A single panel that goes from the front all the way to the back. And this is panel 2. You can see that this is what I was talking about, the columns. Personally, for myself and my own measurements, it worked out perfectly that what I needed was to make 4 columns per side, and that is exactly how the pattern is written. So I didn't even have to mess around with it too much. That was pretty good. And there's nothing weird or different or customized about how I went about crocheting each panel. I crocheted exactly as written. The customizations come, obviously, how to construct them together, tie them up on the sides, and this lace pattern that is the same lace pattern as what I did on the skirt. So I tried so hard. It honestly took me a lot of tries to get it to look pretty good and to make it resemble the skirt. So one thing that I noticed when I was wearing the top, trying it on, was because I did this overlap and I did not make the front and the back of the lace pattern longer, what happens is the middle appears to be shorter and the sides appear to be longer. If you didn't notice it before, maybe you do now. So that definitely created a bit of a weird shape while being worn, and I didn't really know how to account for it. It was really complicated. I figured out that nobody's gonna know. Nobody's gonna know. And if they do, they would be really not nice to point it out, because everyone in the wedding knew that this was handmade. Everyone knew that I had been working on this for several months, and I didn't really show any pictures to anyone during the process, so it was a surprise for everyone. But yeah, this was pretty tough to know what to do with this. In the end, I didn't come up with any way how to deal with this. It just is what it is. I don't know. I'm sure that there's a way that some smart actual crochet designer would be able to resolve this issue. That's not gonna be me. Alright, well, I think that we're ready to talk about the skirt, so let's do that next. Alright, well, this is the best angle that I've got to work with. We're gonna make it work. So here's the skirt folded up. Let's start and the top. This is the section that goes from the waist down to the middle of the thigh. So I'm not gonna go through the whole debacle on the stupid slit on the skirt. You heard all about it on the previous video. If you want to know why this is the way that it is, you're gonna have to go watch that other video. But we're gonna move on from it. So after this was sewn together with the serger machine, and again, I know that this is ugly, okay? Don't worry about it. I knew that I needed to add an elastic waistband to this. So what I did, also, yeah, here's the little bit of makeup, I think, right there. So I just went to Joann's, and I remember now that what I bought was, I mean, I don't know the name, so I'm sorry if I call it the wrong thing, but it's like a waistband strap or whatever this is called. And it's really hard to color match with the off-white from the Luminance lace, but you can't see it from the front, so it doesn't matter. I hand sewn the top part all the way around. When I was done with that, put the waistband on and start hand sewing all the bottom part all the way around. So that's the waistband. I'm sure that there's a better way to do this. This actually does not stretch. It stretches a little bit, right? But that's as far as it'll stretch, and this is without stretching. It's definitely not much at all. I was able to put it on and off, but it was not easy. So I would do some more research on how to add waistbands. I'm sure that there's the smart way, the right way of doing this. But it worked for what I needed. You cannot see, now you can see the waistband underneath the stitches, but you honestly cannot see that, especially while it's being worn. You cannot see it. So it worked just fine for what I needed it to. So I don't want to go through the best way to crochet this from the waist down to the middle of the thigh, because that was the most difficult and time-consuming part of this entire process, and I made a lot of mistakes. It was not good. I made it work, but it was not good. So I'm not going to go through that part. I would strongly recommend, if you have already made yourself a skirt or a dress, or use whatever pattern that maybe you followed that you liked. If you're like me, you had never made yourself a skirt before, or you didn't know where to start, honestly, just go out there, see if there are not just skirt patterns that you like, but also dress patterns too, especially if they have like a similar look to what you're going for. Just go for a dress pattern too, and don't stick to just wedding, patterns that are categorized as wedding dress patterns, because there's really not that many out there in Ravelry. another thing that I'll add, which I didn't think of until afterwards. I went through this entire process thinking, wow, I really wish that there was a service somewhere online that could teach how to design a dress or just a pattern in general. Try Skillshare and try Domestika and see if there are any online courses out there that may address a design question that you may have. So let's move on to the customization that I did to the garden collar pattern. So let's say that there are 6 rows. I take my measurement, I divide it by 6, and I'm pretty sure I came up with each row of the original pattern I needed 8 rows of that to make it all the way down. I wanted the increase of the columns to be as seamless as possible. So what I did was, instead of increasing on the very first and last stitch, for example, what I did, you can see here as an example, crochet 1, the second stitch I increase by 2, and then all the way to the end I increase on the second to last stitch. That's how I was able to achieve for the columns to grow so seamlessly. Also, this is pretty funny. This stitch marker was definitely there on wedding day, because I did not see that until I took out the dress to make these videos. So yeah, I walked down the aisle with a stitch marker in my skirt, but I did not notice, and if anyone did notice, they didn't say anything, so that was very nice. The edging itself, I did not modify much. I only modified maybe like the amount of stitches in the chains in between the pattern to account for, I don't know, just to make it lay flatter and look a little nicer considering the modifications that I had already done. So yeah, let's go look at the top and how I used the end of this pattern from this row all the way down and the lace, how I added that to the top. Alrighty, so here we are taking a really detailed look at this edging on the top. So this must look very similar, right? It looks exactly like the bottom of the dress. I did have to do some modifications, especially you'll notice that there's a lot less chains between the column and the lace. And then at the end, I decided I also wanted to add just a final row of single crochets, and try really hard to make them face forward somehow. I feel like they did that pretty naturally, which was a relief. I think it looks really cute the way that it looks, and it just, I think personally I'm not the type of crocheter that puts a lot of thought and effort into finishing details. but I think that knowing that, I feel like this is a pretty cute little finishing row. Just double crochets all the way around. So yeah. And that's it for the top edging. So the last thing that I want to touch on again is the yarn. So here is the Luminance lace. I have no idea if you can see it because I'm using my back camera. So if you can't, just bear with me, okay? But here's Luminance lace. I still have so actually towards the end of the skirt, I needed one more ball of yarn. So I had to go online and look for it. And when I went to KnitPicks, turns out there was a sale on the bare line. So I couldn't just buy one ball, especially considering how much I loved working with this yarn. I just had to buy more, okay? So I bought 3 balls of yarn even though I really only needed one, and out of the one I maybe only needed like half of that ball of yarn. So I have quite a lot of this left. This is the ball that I worked with. So this is not exactly 100 grams. I don't know how much there is left, but it's quite a lot. And I have 2 whole 100 gram balls of yarn left. And I know I want to make something with this because it's so nice. But you know, the summer is almost over here, but I don't care. I think I know which pattern I'm gonna use for this, but that's gonna be for another video. This is, again, Luminance Lace by KnitPicks. It is 100% mulberry silk. It is a fantastic yarn to work with. It's lace weight, of course. 2-ply. It's got a little bit of a fuzziness to it. And it is a great yarn. Don't get me wrong. The only thing that I'll add about it is that 90% you'll start working with a ball with one of the hanks of this yarn, and 90% of it will be perfectly fine. 95% of it will be perfectly fine. But then you may encounter some parts of the yarn where they're almost like pilled, or yeah, just kind of just one big blob of pilled yarn. So I would have to, it was they could be pretty bulky. So I would normally cut it and reattach to avoid having inconsistencies in my stitch like that. That is the one negative that I was able to find about this yarn, but other than that, it is so nice. It's so soft. I wouldn't say like a plushy soft, I would say like almost like a velvety soft. Excellent stitch definition. It is truly beautiful. I used this held double, so 2 strands of Luminance held double for the skirt, and for the top I did 1 of this held together with the mohair. I need to keep it kind of far away from my face because yeah, I mentioned it in the previous video how I don't know if this is with all mohairs, okay? I actually remember that I have worked with one mohair before this, but I never finished the project, so I don't really know if the experience would have been the same had I kept working with it. But my experience with this mohair, which is Berroco Ariel, which I bought on webs or yarn.com, is that as you're working with it, the mohair sheds. And it sheds, I mean, maybe all mohairs are like that. I don't know. But I felt like this was shedding quite a lot. So much so that during the whole time that I worked on the top, and when I had to go back at the end of the whole process and crochet the edge, I could feel almost like I was breathing it in. So it would like tickle my throat and just make me feel like I had a cold. Not a great experience. It looks nice, but it does shed, and it sheds quite a bit. So I would probably work with it again just to get rid of it. Just to not have it in my stash anymore. Maybe one day I'll make a sweater or something, and I'll use this mohair. I have 1.5 balls left of it. So yeah, Berroco Ariel, not great. I would not, oh my god, look at that. It's so much. It's ridiculous. I would probably not work with it again, but considering I have 1.5 balls of it in my stash, I'll probably find a use for it, but I will not enjoy it. This, however, excellent yarn. When I was trying to pick yarns for my dress, and I encountered the Luminance lace by KnitPicks, I did go online and try to find reviews, especially YouTube. It was mostly YouTube that I wanted to get, well, and also Instagram. I wanted to get a good feel from other people's experience and if this was a good yarn to use or not. And there's I don't know, I guess maybe it's not a very popular yarn. It's definitely expensive. It's I want to say it's one of the more expensive yarns that they have. Not by yard. I think that the value per, cuz there's 100 grams, I think it's 400 something yards. I don't know why 470 yards sounds right, but that sounds about right. So for $25.99 US dollars and over 400 yards, even if it's lace weight, I feel like that's pretty good. While I was editing the video, I looked up how many yards are actually in the 100-gram hank of Luminance lace. It is 878. So yeah, not a lot of information out there from other people experience using it. So hopefully if you're here just to look at my review of the yarn, I love the yarn. I cannot wait to work with this again. Like I said, I'm pretty sure I have lined up what I want to make with this yarn. I might have enough to make 2 tops. And I'm very excited for it. So yeah, definitely recommended. But before we call it a day, I also want to talk about blocking. I just steamed it. That's the nice quick answer. I just steam blocked it. I did read online that maybe steaming was not the right way to block for silk. I had several swatches from me just trying to figure out exactly how I wanted the design of my skirt to look like. So I just picked up a few of them and I just tested it out. I was able to steam block with the mid setting and the high setting, and they worked perfectly fine. So obviously take this with a grain of salt. do your own experimenting with swatches, but steam blocking worked just fine for me. And that's it, you guys. I don't think that I can go into any more detail as I have with the dress. I think that that's everything that I've got to say about it. I really hope that this is helpful for you, anyone out there that is thinking about making their own wedding dress or any sort of dress for a special occasion and doesn't really know how to go about it. I appreciate you so much being here and watching my video. If you liked it, please let me know. Give me some validation that you enjoyed the information that I gave out or any little piece of information that I gave here. But I'm rambling now, so I'm gonna go. Bye!